Good morning. This is video number 3, and we're still talking about World War I right now. Probably Thursday or Friday, I might do one of the fun little videos about fun things in history that I like. I don't know if y'all are enjoying these. I'm enjoying doing them. We're going to just do a quick recap today, and I'm going to um, continue to go over reasons for World War I, and then we're going to hit immediately into and end with what was going on in Russia that's going to be a problem, and then also how that the end of World War One directly leads to World War Two. World War Two was completely and totally fought over issues that were not solved in World War One, and if anyone tries to tell you differently on that one, I will tell them they're wrong on that. Um, that's one of the things that I think is inherently true in all of this study of history, is that you cannot say that nothing that happened in World War One did not directly cause World War Two. And I think that's one of my reasons why it's one of my more favorite things in history to talk about, because there's a very few things that you can say in history that you can point to on a page and say that right there, that caused this. Leading up to the Civil War, the Missouri Compromise was one of those. The Three-Fifths Acts was definitely one of those. So this is definitely one of those times where you can say everything that we were talking about is directly led to World War II. I'm going to use a book today that I discovered from a friend who also teaches in the school system, Chelsea Dennison, who just had a new baby boy. So hi, Chelsea. And she showed me this book last year, and I love it. And I highly recommend that even if you have a high schooler, that you get this book. There's one for U.S. history too, and there's one for English. I bought all of these for my high schooler, and I know it says middle school, but these are amazing little books, and I do not get any kickbacks from these whatsoever. These are amazing little reads, and it helps break it down so easily for the students. And I use this constantly in my classroom this year. And so it's a great little book, and this is what we're going to be looking at today. So going back to reasons why we fought World War One. Reason why I'm recapping today is I want to talk about a couple of different things specifically: militarism, imperialism. I want to talk again about nationalism, and then mobilization. And we're gonna that's going to be our focus today. So after Napoleon, and everything goes back to Napoleon. My students in class will tell you I adore Napoleon. Just in the fact I adore talking about Napoleon, just because it's just like either everything that he touches is gold or it just goes away. I mean, it's just he's either great or he's not. There's very little in between with this man. But in terms of World War One, everything does go back to Napoleon, and it goes back to how he structured Europe, and then how Europe was structured after he was in rule. Okay, so one of the things that we want to talk about imperialism, and if you don't know what imperialism, it's colonialism. It's where these nations go into these other nations and they take over, and then they integrate their cultures into those communities. So, for instance, you could think about when Britain went into India, and in parts of India, and the people in those cultures now dressed in Western wear. They dressed like the British. They drank tea, and that was an influence from Britain. When they came into when other countries went in to South America and took things took countries there. And I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, that's imperialism. And imperialism is going into other countries and taking over their cultures and bringing your culture in, and you're pretty much in control of it. Okay, so that was a big thing. Now, the reason why that's important is in imperialism, if you were to take over a country, and we're going to use Great Britain and say Australia for this example, when Great Britain goes to war, that country goes to war. They have no choice in this matter. So imperialism will do that. So for these countries, like Great Britain would have had a strong army anyway, but they have an even stronger army because they have the advantage to be able to go into these countries and take over these countries. And then they have these large armies because of this. And a lot of countries did this. It wasn't just Great Britain, and I'm picking on Great Britain right now, but they were not the only ones. So you have all of these countries that can do that, and then you have a lot of countries that can't. Okay. Militarism, we talked about yesterday. Militarism is building up an army. And not only are you building up an army, you're building up supplies for this army. One of the things that I think that you never think about when you're talking about armies, and especially before 1940s, is that you had animals that had to go with the army. They were either going to the army with the army for slaughter, or they were going as pack animals, or they were going as to carry weapons. And so you had to now take feed for animals, feed for people, clothing, ammunition, weapons. I mean, you had a ton of supplies. So, for instance, when Napoleon went to Russia, he had like 600,000 men with him. But in reality, he had a lot more than that because he had animals, and he had people that had to take care of the animals, and then you had people that had to take care of the weapons, and you had to have people that took care, that cooked, and so you had a massive army at this point. And that's why a lot of countries did not have standing armies, because number one, they didn't have the men for it, and number two, they just didn't have the supplies that you had to keep to have a standing army. A few years ago, my son and I went to Shiloh, and it just was we don't live far from Shiloh, one of the battles in the Civil War. And we happened to be there and did not mean to even be there on that day, but it happened to be there on an anniversary. And so there was a lot of like cannons being fired, and a lot more historical reenactors, historical guides, I should say. They're talking to us about it. And he told me something I had never thought about. Then in the Civil War, the most targeted area of a line of soldiers was their supply wagons. Because if their supply wagons were down, there's not too many places they could go. So they would kill the horses that, or they would target the horses that pull their supply wagons. I did not know that, but it makes sense. So militarism is growing. So we have imperialism, which is when you go in and you take care of another, you take over another country, and you bring your culture in. You have militarism, where you're building an army now. Okay. Nationalism, it's a reinvigorated sense of patriotism. I said yesterday, it's closely related to patriotism on paper. Countries wanting to prove their might, ethnic groups wanting to form their own nations. And we're going to start seeing battle lines being drawn between Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy, against Great Britain, France, and Russia. Okay. All right. If you're looking at causes for World War I, you have the main causes: militarism, alliance, imperialism, and nationalism. I put mobilization in here also. Mobilization is an act of moving your army from point A to point B. And in 1914, if I was moving my army from point A to point B, then that was an act of war, because there's no reason why I should be moving my army to you unless I'm coming to fight you. Okay. So for me, I always have my students put militarism/mobilization, because it's going to make countries very, very nervous that you're building an army, but it's really going to make them nervous if you start moving it to them. Okay. All right. So we start seeing militarism, alliances, and when one country went to war, they all went to war. And this is something that didn't happen in the concert of Europe. Great Britain had said, no, we're not going to do that. But battle lines had been being drawn after the concert of Europe, after the Crimean War. And even though Great Britain and France went to war against Russia in the Crimean War, they're all allies at this point. And it was after Austria-Hungary had declared war on Serbia. And we'll get to that in just a second again. All right. So the trigger for war, the immediate cause of World War I was the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophia. And we talked about that yesterday, that they were both assassinated in the Bosnian city of Sarajevo. Now, going back to why that was, Austria-Hungary had developed a very large kingdom after Prussia had defeated them in a battle, and they needed money and they needed land, and so they had sided with Hungary. Now, Hungary had a lot of countries that they absorbed after the Ottoman Empire collapsed. All of these countries were very Slavic leaning, meaning that they had close relations and close cousins with other Slavic countries: Bosnia, Serbia, Romania, Russia. Okay, so all of these countries are very closely connected by language and by culture. And Serbia wanted Bosnia for themselves, and Bosnia was under the flag of Austria-Hungary. And Bosnia wanted to be under the most of Bosnia wanted to be under the Hungarian flag, also, or just the Hungarian flag, or if not the Hungarian flag, the Serbian flag. So the Serbian nationalists went in and killed the Archduke Ferdinand. Well, when Serbia then did that, Austria-Hungary told them, we're going to declare war on you if you do not accept that you've done this, if you do not come out and say that you did this. And Serbia said, we're not going to do that. Well, Austria-Hungary knew that if they declared war on Serbia, Serbia would go to Russia. Okay, Serbia, Russia, they're close cousins in terms of Slavic cultures. So Austria-Hungary does the only thing that they know to do, and they go to a country that has massive money and weapons and armies, and that's Prussia, which is now Germany. And so they declared war on Serbia with Germany's backing, and Germany told them, if you go to war, we will give you a blank check. Okay. And this blank check was money, weapons, men, whatever they needed that they would get to go to war. Well, Russia did the same thing for Serbia. And so battle lines are now being drawn. Great Britain and France will back Russia, which in turn backs Serbia. And Prussia, which is now Germany, and Italy backs Austria-Hungary. Okay? All right. So when Austria-Hungary's declaration of war, Russia starts mobilizing their army and taking it to the border. Well, Russia had not technically declared war on anyone. Austria-Hungary had not declared war on Russia. But when Russia started moving, then that is what was an act of war. It was a cause of war. So Austria-Hungary immediately declared war then on Russia. Okay. The reason why Great Britain will eventually get into it, even though they were backing Russia, is the fact that Germany will not leave Belgium alone. Belgium was neutral. And so they give Germany an ultimatum: leave Belgium alone, quit going through Belgium to get to France. And Germany was like, make us. And so Great Britain was like, okay. And so that's how they get into war. Okay. All right. So alliance recap. We have Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. We have Great Britain, France, and Russia, and Serbia. Serbia is just there. Okay. All right. America is staying out of it. Woodrow Wilson is our president. For Florence folks, our Wilson Dam is named after Woodrow Wilson. The dam is being built during this time period, and he funds that. And so that is why the name of the dam is Wilson Dam. Okay. All right. We will get into it then later on with the Zimmerman telegram, and it's a proposal from Germany to Mexico for them to form an alliance and wage war against the United States. And then Mexico could have the southern part of the United States, and Germany would take the rest of it. We didn't intercept this telegram, but the Mexicans did turn it down too. So, but on April 2nd, 1917, U.S. declared war on Germany and joined World War I. Now, that was also due to the sinking of the Lusitania and the unrestricted submarine warfare, which I'm not going to get into unless someone just asks specifically, because we're already into several minutes on this video. Okay. All right. So at this point, I'm going to end it. And then my next video will talk about the Russians and why they were so important to the war, and when they got out of it, what happened. And then we'll go into, if you did see there, we were in the pandemic at the end of World War I, just like we're in a pandemic now. And I'm sorry, history repeats itself. And we are seeing that again. And I told my students, I said, you are living history right now. This hasn't happened for 102 years. You need to be writing this down and journaling this and chronicling this, because this is amazing that we're living through this. All right, so I'm going to end it for now, and then we will do another one later about, as I stated, about Russia and the end of World War I and where we're going from there.